Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In the world of geopolitics, I have learned to understand that nothing is ever as it seems. I have been curious about the Iran Israel war, and I thought I'd do some digging, look into history. Why is everything happening the way it is? And I uncovered some very interesting facts. Facts like Iran and Israel were actually allies. They were actually working on secret weapons together, traded secrets together, traded weapons together at some point in time. And even while to this on the surface, to all of us, they look like enemies behind closed doors. They were selling weapons to each other. So I thought I'll share some of my findings with you guys. I hope you enjoy it. It's not here to sway anyone's opinion. It's just the result of my findings. I find it interesting. And that's what this channel is about, in case you didn't know. I like to talk about, or at least expose controversial topics for people to watch, listen, and enlighten themselves. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Iran versus Israel, How Two Secret Allies Became Deadly Enemies. Chapter 1. The Shocking Alliance, when Iran and Israel were secret partners. The November rain fell steadily on the streets of Paris as two men entered the Ritz Hotel through separate entrances, their movements choreographed to avoid detection by the international press and intelligence services that constantly monitored such establishments. The year was 1977, and in a lavishly appointed suite on the third floor, Israeli Foreign Minister Moshe Dayan sat across from Iranian General Hassan Toufanian, the Shah's Vice Minister of War. Between them lay blueprints for missile systems that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Middle East. This clandestine meeting, one of dozens that occurred throughout the 1960s and 1970s, represented the apex of one of history's most unlikely partnerships, the secret alliance between Iran and Israel. The roots of this extraordinary relationship stretched back to the early 1950s, when the young state of Israel found itself surrounded by hostile Arab nations determined to destroy it. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding prime minister, understood that his nation's survival depended on breaking through this ring of enmity. In the map-covered war room of his Tel Aviv office, Ben-Gurion had developed what would become known as the Periphery Doctrine, a strategic masterpiece that would guide Israeli foreign policy for decades. The concept was elegantly simple yet revolutionary. Israel would leap over the hostile Arab states immediately surrounding it to forge alliances with non-Arab nations on the periphery of the Middle East. Turkey, Ethiopia, and most importantly, Iran became the cornerstones of this audacious strategy. Meanwhile, in Tehran's opulent Golistan palace, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi faced his own existential challenges. The Shah, who had narrowly survived a coup attempt in 1953 orchestrated by nationalist Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, viewed Arab nationalism and Soviet communism as twin threats to his throne and his vision of a modernized Persian Empire. Gamal Abdel Nasser's pan-Arab movement, emanating from Egypt like a revolutionary wildfire, threatened to destabilize the entire region. The Shah watched nervously as Nasser's influence spread through Syria, Iraq, and even into Iran's own Arab-populated Khuzestan province. In this climate of mutual vulnerability, the Shah and Ben-Gurion found common cause. The first tentative contacts between the two nations occurred through an unlikely conduit, Iran's ancient Jewish community, which traced its roots back to the Babylonian exile 25 centuries earlier. These Persian Jews, numbering over 100,000, served as a natural bridge between the two civilizations. Israeli intelligence officers, posing as teachers and agricultural advisors, began arriving in Iran in 1958, establishing networks that would endure for decades. The relationship deepened when Israeli Mossad helped establish and train SAVAK, Iran's feared secret police, providing expertise in counterintelligence and interrogation techniques that would help the monarch maintain his grip on power. By the 1960s, the partnership had evolved far beyond intelligence sharing. Israeli agricultural experts transformed Iran's arid landscapes using revolutionary irrigation techniques developed in the Negev desert. Iranian oil flowed secretly to Israel through complex third-party arrangements, circumventing the Arab oil embargo. Israeli companies, operating through European subsidiaries, built infrastructure projects throughout Iran, from telecommunications networks to military installations. The Shah's regime became one of Israel's largest oil suppliers, while Israel provided Iran with advanced military technology that Western nations were reluctant to sell directly. The cooperation reached its zenith with Operation Flower, a joint missile development program that remained hidden from the world for decades. Beginning in 1977, Iran and Israel collaborated on modifying American-supplied Hawk missiles and developing new ballistic missile capabilities. Israeli technicians worked alongside Iranian engineers in secret facilities outside Isfahan, sharing knowledge that would later prove invaluable to both nations' military programs. The financial scale was staggering. Iran invested over $1 billion in Israeli defense industries, funding research and development that would produce some of Israel's most advanced weapons systems. This cooperation extended beyond military matters into the realm of regional strategy. Israeli and Iranian intelligence services coordinated operations against common enemies, particularly Palestinian groups that threatened both the Shah's stability and Israeli security. When Kurdish rebels sought support for their independence struggle against Baghdad, Israel and Iran jointly armed and trained them, using the Kurdish insurgency to weaken their mutual Iraqi adversary. Israeli advisors helped modernize Iran's military doctrine, while Iranian diplomats provided Israel with crucial intelligence about Arab military preparations before the 1967 Six-Day War. The human dimension of this partnership was equally remarkable. Thousands of Israelis lived and worked in Iran during the 1960s and 1970s, forming friendships and business partnerships that transcended politics. Iranian students studied at Israeli universities, particularly in agricultural and medical fields. El Al flights connected Tel Aviv and Tehran, though passengers had to change planes in Istanbul to maintain the fiction of non-recognition. Iranians and Israelis traveled freely between both nations, many maintaining dual businesses and properties. These personal connections created a web of relationships that supporters hoped would endure, regardless of political changes. Yet beneath this flourishing partnership lay fundamental contradictions that would ultimately prove fatal. The Shah's relationship with Israel remained largely hidden from the Iranian public, who sympathized with Palestinians and viewed Israel through the lens of Islamic solidarity. Religious leaders, particularly an exiled cleric named Ruhollah Khomeini, denounced the Shah's ties to the Zionist entity as a betrayal of Islamic principles. As opposition to the Shah's rule intensified throughout the 1970s, his Israeli connection became a liability, ammunition for revolutionaries who portrayed him as a puppet of foreign powers. The warning signs were evident to those willing to see them. During the October 1973 Yom Kippur War, the Shah faced immense pressure from Arab states to join the oil embargo against Israel's Western supporters. Though he ultimately maintained oil supplies to Israel through covert channels, the incident revealed the precarious nature of the alliance. The Iranian public turned against Israel, influenced by Palestinian propaganda and religious rhetoric. The Shah's own advisors warned that the Israeli relationship was becoming politically toxic, undermining the monarchy's legitimacy among an increasingly religious population. As 1978 dawned, with revolutionary fervor spreading through Iran's cities, Israeli intelligence stationed in Tehran sent increasingly urgent cables to Tel Aviv, warning that the partnership's days were numbered. The Mossad's station chief in Tehran reported massive demonstrations where crowds chanted "Death to Israel" alongside "Death to the Shah." Israeli businesses began quietly evacuating personnel and assets. In one of history's great geopolitical ironies, the very apparatus that Israel had helped create was now powerless to prevent the revolution that would transform Iran from Israel's closest regional ally into its most implacable enemy, setting the stage for decades of confrontation that would reshape the Middle East's destiny forever. Chapter 2: The Revolution That Changed Everything. The Air France Boeing 747 descended through the morning clouds towards Tehran's Mehrabad Airport on February 1, 1979, carrying a passenger whose arrival would shatter the Middle Eastern order that had existed for 30 years. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, after 14 years in exile, pressed his face against the window, gazing down on the millions of Iranians who had gathered to witness his return. The 78-year-old cleric, draped in black robes and wearing his distinctive black turban, had spent years in Iraq and France plotting to overthrow the Shah's regime. Now, as his plane touched Iranian soil, he brought with him a revolutionary ideology that would transform Iran from Israel's closest regional partner into its deadliest enemy. The panic in Tel Aviv's government corridors was palpable. Prime Minister Menachem Begin convened emergency sessions of the Security Cabinet as intelligence reports flooded in from Tehran. The Mossad's extensive network in Iran, built over 20 years of partnership, was collapsing by the hour. Israeli military advisors who had trained the Shah's elite units now found themselves hunted by revolutionary committees. The sophisticated listening posts that Israel had operated along Iran's border with the Soviet Union were being overrun. Billions of dollars in joint military projects, including the secret missile development facilities outside Isfahan, fell into revolutionary hands. Most terrifying of all, Iran's new leaders possessed detailed knowledge of Israel's military capabilities, defense strategies, and intelligence methods, all shared during the years of cooperation. The escape of Israeli personnel from Iran became a desperate race against time. Over 100 Israeli advisors, technicians, and their families needed immediate evacuation as Revolutionary Guards began conducting house-to-house searches for Zionist spies. The Israeli embassy in Tehran, though never officially acknowledged, was ransacked by revolutionary mobs who discovered documents that would later be used to expose the depth of the Shah's collaboration with Israel. Some Israelis managed to flee across the Turkish border using false passports, while others sought refuge with Iranian Jewish families who risked their lives to protect them. The head of Israel's military mission in Tehran spent 3 harrowing weeks hidden in the trunks of cars and in basements before finally escaping through Pakistan, using documents identifying him as a Belgian citizen. Iran's ancient Jewish community, which had served as a bridge between the two nations, now found itself in mortal danger. Revolutionary tribunals accused prominent Jewish businessmen of being Israeli agents. Though Khomeini initially distinguished between Judaism as a protected religion and Zionism as a political enemy, the distinction often blurred in practice. Thousands departed in a painful exodus, abandoning businesses, homes, and centuries of heritage. Those who remained faced constant suspicion and surveillance, their loyalty to the Islamic Republic perpetually questioned. Yet in one of the most extraordinary paradoxes of modern Middle Eastern history, Israel's relationship with Iran did not end with the revolution. As the Iran-Iraq War erupted in September 1980, with Saddam Hussein's armies invading Iranian territory, Israel's strategic calculus underwent a remarkable transformation. Despite Khomeini's virulent anti-Israeli rhetoric, Begin's government calculated that a weakened Iran, locked in prolonged conflict with Iraq, served Israeli interests better than an Iraqi victory that would empower Saddam Hussein, who possessed chemical weapons and harbored nuclear ambitions. Thus began one of the most closely guarded secrets of the 1980s, Israel's continued arms sales to revolutionary Iran. Operating through intermediaries in Europe and utilizing complex financial arrangements involving Swiss banks and Panamanian shell companies, Israeli arms dealers supplied Iran with desperately needed spare parts for its American-made weapon systems. Uzi submachine guns, artillery shells, and aircraft parts flowed from Israeli warehouses to Iranian forces battling Iraqi troops in the marshes of southern Mesopotamia. The Israeli government justified these sales through a combination of realpolitik and wishful thinking. Some officials believed that maintaining contacts with Iran, even hostile revolutionary Iran, would prove valuable when moderates eventually returned to power. Others simply saw profit in Iran's desperate need for weapons that Israel could supply from its extensive stocks of captured Soviet equipment and American surplus. The November 1986 revelation of the Iran-Contra affair exposed these secret dealings to global scrutiny. The world learned that Israel had served as the conduit for American arms sales to Iran, with profits diverted to fund Nicaraguan rebels. The scandal revealed that Israeli officials had met secretly with Iranian representatives in European hotels, negotiating deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, while publicly maintaining that Iran represented an existential threat. The hypocrisy was staggering, yet it reflected the complex realities of Middle Eastern geopolitics, where yesterday's allies become today's enemies, and secret cooperation persists despite public hostility. Meanwhile, Iran's revolutionary government embarked on its mission to export the Islamic Revolution throughout the region. The Islamic Revolutionary Corps established training camps for foreign fighters, particularly Lebanese Shia who would later form Hezbollah. Iranian money and weapons flowed to Palestinian groups willing to embrace Tehran's revolutionary ideology. The goal, repeatedly stated by Iranian leaders, was the liberation of Jerusalem and the destruction of the Zionist entity. This was not mere rhetoric, but a fundamental pillar of the Islamic Republic's identity, enshrined in its constitution and reinforced through countless speeches, demonstrations, and propaganda campaigns. The transformation was complete. The nation that had once been Israel's primary regional partner, sharing intelligence, military technology, and strategic vision, had become its most implacable foe. The sophisticated weapon systems that Israel had helped Iran develop would eventually be turned against it, while the methods that Mossad had taught SAVAK would be employed by Iranian agents working to strike Israeli interests worldwide. The personal relationships, business partnerships, and cultural exchanges that had flourished for 3 decades were severed, replaced by mutual hostility that would define Middle Eastern politics for generations. As the 1980s progressed, it became clear that this was not a temporary rupture that might heal. The Islamic Republic's opposition to Israel was not merely political, but ideological and theological, woven into the very fabric of the revolutionary state. For Israel, the loss of Iran meant more than just the end of an alliance. It meant the emergence of a new type of enemy, one motivated not by territorial disputes or nationalist ambitions, but by religious conviction and revolutionary fervor. The shadow that would emerge from this transformation would reshape the region's destiny. Chapter 3: The Shadow War Erupts. Proxies, Assassinations, and Nuclear Nightmares. The motorcycle weaved through Tehran's morning traffic on January 12, 2010, its riders hidden behind dark helmets as they approached a Peugeot 206 stopped at a red light. Inside the car, Masoud Ali Mohammadi, one of Iran's leading nuclear physicists, was reviewing equations on his way to Tehran University. The motorcyclist pulled alongside, attached a magnetic bomb to the driver's door, and accelerated away into the maze of vehicles. Seconds later, the explosion shattered windows 3 blocks away, killing Ali Mohammadi instantly and announcing to the world that the shadow war between Iran and Israel had entered a deadly new phase. This assassination was neither the first nor the last in a campaign that would claim the lives of at least 6 Iranian nuclear scientists between 2007 and 2020. Each killing bore the hallmarks of professional intelligence work, meticulous planning, flawless execution, and complete anonymity. Though Israel never officially claimed responsibility, few doubted the invisible hand orchestrating these operations. The message was clear. Iran's nuclear program would exact a personal price from those who advanced it. The evolution from the rhetoric of revolution to this deadly shadow war had been gradual but inexorable. Throughout the 1980s, as Iran consolidated its revolutionary government, it began constructing a network of proxy forces that would become its primary weapon against Israel. The most successful of these proxies emerged in the chaos of Lebanon's civil war. In 1982, when Israel invaded Lebanon to expel Palestinian forces, Iran saw an opportunity. Revolutionary Guards arrived in the Bekaa Valley, ostensibly to fight the occupation, but actually to plant seeds of a new resistance movement among Lebanon's dispossessed Shia population. Hezbollah, the Party of God, grew from these seeds into Iran's most powerful proxy army. Trained by Revolutionary Guards, funded by Iranian oil money, and armed with increasingly sophisticated weapons, Hezbollah transformed from a ragtag militia into a formidable force. By the 1990s, it had driven Israel from southern Lebanon, controlling vast territories and commanding the loyalty of hundreds of thousands of Lebanese Shia. For Iran, Hezbollah represented the perfect weapon, a deniable force that could strike Israel while maintaining plausible distance from Tehran. The 2006 Lebanon War demonstrated just how effective this proxy strategy had become. When Hezbollah fighters crossed into Israel, killing 8 soldiers and capturing 2 others, they triggered a 34-day conflict that shocked Israeli military establishment. Hezbollah's arsenal of Iranian-supplied rockets, numbering over 14,000, rained down on Israeli cities, forcing hundreds of thousands into bomb shelters. The sophisticated bunker systems, communication networks, and military tactics that Hezbollah employed bore unmistakable Iranian fingerprints. Though Israel inflicted heavy damage on Lebanon's infrastructure and killed hundreds of Hezbollah fighters, the war ended without decisive victory, demonstrating that Iran could effectively wage war against Israel without firing a single shot from its own territory. While Hezbollah grabbed headlines, another equally significant battle was unfolding in cyberspace. The Stuxnet virus, discovered in 2010 but likely deployed years earlier, represented a revolution in warfare. This extraordinarily sophisticated piece of malware specifically targeted Iranian nuclear facilities,
particularly the uranium enrichment centrifuges at Natanz. The virus caused centrifuges to spin out of control while displaying normal readings to operators, destroying 1,000 machines and setting Iran's nuclear program back by years. Though neither Israel nor the United States officially acknowledged authorship, security experts recognized the operation as a masterpiece of cyber warfare, demonstrating that the shadow war had expanded into entirely new domains. The human cost of this conflict extended far beyond targeted assassinations and military casualties. Families across the region found themselves torn apart by the escalating confrontation. Iranian nuclear scientists began living under constant fear, their children escorted to school by bodyguards, their wives scanning nervously for motorcycles at every traffic light. In Israel, communities near the Lebanese and Gaza borders constructed safe rooms in every home, and children learned to recognize the difference between incoming rocket alerts and all-clear signals before they could read. The psychological toll of living under constant threat created generations marked by trauma and suspicion. The Syrian civil war, beginning in 2011, opened another front in the shadow war. Iran deployed revolutionary guards and proxies to support Bashar al-Assad's regime, establishing permanent military bases and weapons factories on Israel's northern border. Israel responded with hundreds of airstrikes against Iranian positions, weapons convoys, and military installations across Syria. These operations, conducted with increasing frequency and boldness, brought the two nations closer to direct confrontation than at any point before. Israeli jets struck targets from Damascus to the Iraqi border, while Iran attempted to establish a permanent military presence that would complete its axis of resistance from Tehran through Baghdad and Damascus to Beirut. The nuclear dimension of the conflict added existential urgency to every calculation. Iran's uranium enrichment program, begun in secret and revealed by dissidents in 2002, progressed despite international sanctions, sabotage, and assassinations. Israeli leaders repeatedly declared that Iran approaching nuclear weapons capability represented a red line that would trigger military action. The specter of Israeli airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities haunted international diplomacy, with war games and contingency plans prepared by militaries across the region. The 2015 nuclear deal temporarily eased tensions, but its subsequent collapse reignited fears of military confrontation. By 2024, the shadow war had erupted into direct exchanges. Iranian drones and missiles struck Israeli territory in retaliation for an attack on a compound in Damascus. Israel responded with carefully calibrated strikes on Iranian military installations, marking the first acknowledged direct military exchange between the two nations. These April 2024 strikes shattered the long-maintained fiction of proxy warfare, forcing both nations to confront the possibility of full-scale conflict. The transformation from secret partners to mortal enemies had taken decades, but its implications would resonate for generations. The sophisticated intelligence networks, military technologies, and strategic insights that Israel and Iran had once shared now fueled their confrontation. The personal relationships and cultural exchanges that had connected their peoples were replaced by mutual demonization and generational hatred. The shadow war, with its assassinations, cyber attacks, and proxy battles, had become the new normal, a permanent state of neither peace nor war that held the entire region hostage to the possibility of catastrophic escalation. As missiles flew between Tehran and Tel Aviv in 2024, the question was no longer whether the former allies would remain enemies, but whether their enmity would consume the entire Middle East in flames that neither nation could control.
Hello, thank you for joining me on this exploration. If you've gotten to this point, I really want to thank you. There is nothing more encouraging than having an audience for content that you've created. If you got up to this point, I hope you've enjoyed the documentary as much as I enjoyed creating it. I thought I'd share some of the research I had found. I thought it was very interesting while I was doing it, and hopefully you found it interesting too. Like I always say, my channel, I want it to be a channel where people can come to find out interesting histories and controversial topics to talk about. So far, this has gone a bit um, different from my usual content. First of all, it's not the usual 1 hour content I like to produce. It's just about under half an hour. But I think it has been an interesting one, a breath of fresh air, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like, uh, subscribe to the channel because there's a lot more stuff I'm working on that will definitely mesmerize you guys. It's wonderful content. Of course, this is just a hobby for me. I still have my usual 9 to 5. I'm a family man. So, but I am working on them and hopefully they'll be out. I'll be releasing more regularly. Hopefully. Well, thank you very much. Like I said, subscribe and see you on the next one.